The concept of percentages. Look at this example here. So if his initial score was 100, when it increased by 20%, it became 120, and now the decrease of 20% happened on a base of 120. So now the new score would be 120 minus 20% of 120. So the new score is 96, which is not the same as the initial score. Basics. To find p% of q, multiply p and q, divide by 100. To find what percentage is p of q, divide p by q and multiply by 100. A crucial concept is that of percentage growth or percentage change. It is new value minus old value divided by old value times 100. Therefore, if 80 becomes 100, the percentage change is new value minus old value divided by old value times 100, which is a positive 25%. However, if 100 becomes 80, now the percentage change is new value minus old value divided by old value times 100. So this leads to a negative 20% change. Let's look at a smart approach to finding percentage increase or decrease. Imagine for a 50% increase in the value of p, we can find the new value. However, we can save time by simply understanding that 50% means 0.5p, and since it is the case of an increase, the final value would be p plus 0.5p, which is 1.5p. Let's take one more example. 70% increase. Now the original value is p. 70% increase means an increment of 0.7p. So the final value must be 1.7p. Therefore, p becomes 1.7p. Another example, 20% decrease means p minus 0.2p, therefore p becomes 0.8p. Similarly, 400% increase would mean p plus 4p, which means p becomes 5p. Another example, p became 10p. What was the percentage increase? Some students would say 1000%, but that's not correct. The increase is only 9p and therefore 900%. Let's take some more examples a bit faster this time. P increased by 30%, the value would become 1.3p. Decreased by 40%, the value would become 0.6p. Increased by 500%, the value would be p plus 5p, which is 6p. Decreased by 300%, therefore p minus 3p, which is minus 2p. Increased by 5 times, so there is an increase of 5p here. The value would become p plus 5p, which is 6p. Increased to 5 times, that means p has become 5p, therefore the increase is only 4p, that means there is a 400% increase. Increased to 700% of its value, see p has become 7p, therefore the increase is 600%. Increased by 700% of its value, so the increase is 7p, the new value would be 8p. Let's delve a bit deeper into this very important concept of percentage increase or decrease. Look at this example here. Let me give you a smart way for solving these questions. The concept is that whenever the question seeks percentage value rather than an absolute answer, please assume the base value to be 100. The question will become very easy. Just beware of the bases during your calculations. So in the question here, we assume that the original price was $100. First, there is a 40% increase. So after the 40% increase, the price of $100 becomes $140. Next, there is a 50% decrease. However, this 50% decrease is on a base of 140 now. Therefore, after the 50% decrease, the value becomes 70. Please note the change in base here. It's 140 now. Initially, it was 100. Next, there is a 60% increase. Therefore, the final value is 70 times 1.6. The value is 112. The original value was 100. The final value is 112. 100 has become 112. Thus, there is a net 12% increase. Please pause the video and solve this question. Since the value required is in percentage and not an absolute value, we can assume the initial price to be 100. First, there is a 50% decrease, so 100 becomes 50. Next, a 200% increase, so 50 becomes 150. Next, a 20% decrease, so 150 becomes 120. Next, a 50% increase, so 120 becomes 180. So we see 100 became 50, became 150, became 120, became 180. Overall, 100 became 180. Therefore, overall, there is an 80% increase in the price of this stock over this entire period. Look at this example here. You will see that now it's about multiple variables here. There is price, there is consumption, and there is expenditure. The concept is that in such questions where you see multiple variables, you must form an equation among the given variables. For example, in the case here, the equation can be price times consumption is expenditure. Initially, we can assume the price to be $1, the consumption to be 100 units, the expenditure would turn out to be $100. Now there has been an increase in price of 25%. Therefore, after the price increase, the equation becomes this. The price, which was $1, now becomes $1.25 because of this 25% increase. The question says that the expenditure remained the same because any increase is to be avoided. So the consumption was $100 earlier. It stays $100 even after price increase. So what must be the new consumption? It turns out to be 80. You see, the consumption was earlier 100, now it is 80. Therefore, to avoid any increase in expenditure, consumption needs to be reduced from 100 to 80. Therefore, the consumption needs to be reduced by 20%. That's our answer, a 20% reduction. A similar question here. Please pause the video and solve this. The relationship is once again price time consumption equals expenditure. Earlier, the price is $1, the consumption is 100 units. Therefore, the expenditure turns out to be $100. And later, you see, price has increased by 50%. So $1 becomes $1.5. And consumption has been reduced by 20%. So 100 units becomes 80 units. So the expenditure, which was initially $100, has become $120. Therefore, the answer is a 20% increase in expenditure. Please pause the video and solve this. The relationship remains the same. Price times consumption is expenditure. So initially, we can say that the expenditure is 1 times 100. We can say that price times consumption is expenditure, $100. However, later there are two changes in price. First, there is a decrease of 20%. So price reduces from $1 to $0.8. And then there is an increase of 50%. So price increases from $0.8 to $1.2. An interesting point here, the order does not really matter whether it is this decrease first or this increase first. Eventually, it is about multiplying by 0.8 for this 20% decrease and multiplying by 1.5 for this 50% increase. The value will turn out to be 1.2 only. The order of these events does not matter. So price, we know, has changed from $1 to $1.2 and the consumption has been reduced by 20%. So consumption, which was 100 units, must now be 80 units. See, the new price is 1.2, the new consumption is 80. Therefore, the new expenditure is 1.2 times 80, which is $96. We see $100 has become $96. Therefore, the answer is a 4% decrease. Ratio proportion. What is the difference between the two? Let's see. Ratio tells how much there is of one thing in relation to another thing. For example, look at this picture. There are 2 red balls to 1 yellow ball. Therefore, the ratio is 2 to 1. Ratio is pronounced A to B. For example, 2 to 1 is the ratio of red balls and yellow ball here. Proportion tells us how much there is of one thing in relation to the whole thing. For example, in this picture, there are 2 red balls in total 3 balls. Therefore, the proportion is 2 in 3. Proportion is pronounced as A in B, as in A in total. For example, 2 red balls in total 3 balls here. Look at this example here. Please pause the video and solve this. A by C can be determined through A by B times B by C. So we have A by B 1 by 4 times B by C, which is 3 by 8. So A by C is equal to 3 by 32. Similarly, A by D can be determined as A by B times B by C times C by D, or simply A by C times C by D. We already have A by C here, so if we simply multiply A by C with C by D, we get A by D. Now ratio A to B to C. We know A by B is 1 by 4 and B by C is 3 by 8. See, B here is 4 and B here is 3. To get the common ratio A to B to C, the value of B in the first equation and the second equation must be the same. So if we write 1 by 4 as 3 by 12 and 3 by 8 as 12 by 32, you see the value of B in the first equation is 12 and in the second equation also it is 12. Therefore, A to B to C becomes 3 to 12 to 32. So the answer is 3 to 12 to 32. Now the last part, we know that C by D is 2 by 5. By the same logic, the value of C in the second equation and the value of C in the third equation need to be same. Therefore, we must write 2 by 5 as 32 by 80. Therefore, now the answer becomes 3 to 12 to 32, and we know C to D is 32 to 80, so we get 80 here. These are the 4 correct answers. Let's take an explanatory example. Here is the question with 6 answer choices. Please pause the video and solve this. A practical approach for solving such questions is to assume values. Always assume simple values that are easy to deal with. For example, we can assume that this fraction is 3 by 5 and this positive integer p is 2. So multiplication by the same integer would simply cancel out the integer and the value of the fraction would remain the same. Therefore, first answer choice is correct. Similarly, even division by the same positive integer would not have any effect because the integer would get cancelled. If you want to understand the steps, this becomes 3 by 2 times 2 by 5 and the 2's get cancelled. The result remains 3 by 5. Therefore, the second answer choice is also correct. However, adding would lead to a different result. You see, 3 by 5, adding the same integer would change the ratio and the value of the fraction would no longer remain the same. Same with subtraction. You see, the ratio would change. Therefore, answer choice D is not correct. Squaring would also change the ratio. 9 by 25 is not the same as 3 by 5. So answer choice E is not correct. Similarly, taking square roots would also change the ratio. Root 3 by root 5 is not the same as 3 by 5. Therefore, the correct answer choices are A and B. Look at this explanatory example. A key concept involved here. The concept is that if A ratio B is 1 to 3, we cannot say that A is equal to 1 and B is equal to 3. Such a deduction would not be correct. However, what we can say is that if A is 1k, then B is 3k, where k is a constant. And you see, the ratio A to B would always turn out to be 1 to 3 because the two k's will always cancel each other. So the key concept involved here is that in such questions, whenever we have a ratio given that A ratio B is 1 ratio 3, we should assume the absolute values of A and B as 1k and 3k respectively. Now let's see what's going on here. When A is increased by 20, so A plus 20, which is equal to 1k plus 20, and B is decreased by 40, so B minus 40, which is equal to 3k minus 40. See, A is 1k and B is 3k. So it's given that this ratio becomes 1 to 4. Therefore, this is equal to 1 by 4. Now let us simplify to get the value of k. We cross multiply and we get 4k plus 80 equals 3k minus 40. We get the value of k as negative 120. That means the value of A is minus 120 and the value of B is minus 360. Now the value of 2a plus 3b can be easily determined. This is 2k plus 9k, which is 11k. We know the value of k, so the value of 11k can be comfortably calculated. The answer is going to be 11 times minus 120, which is minus 1320. That's the correct answer. And the key concept once again is that if a ratio is given, for example, if it is given that m to n is 4 to 5, assume that m is 4k and n is 5k. Then do all such math to find the value of k, and once the value of k is known, such absolute values can be known, and then all such questions can be very comfortably solved. Please pause the video and solve this question. The first expression can be written as p by 10 plus 1 by 10, whereas the second expression can be written as q by 30 plus 1 by 30. Now, since the ratio p to q is 1 to 3, the values of p by 10 and q by 30 are the same. These two can be ignored, and since 1 by 10 is greater than 1 by 30, we can conclude that quantity A is greater. In case you were not able to find this catch, a lengthier approach could have been to assume values of P and Q, a positive pair and a negative pair. And you will see that for this pair of values as well as for this pair of values, quantity A will turn out to be greater. A is the correct answer choice. Please pause the video and solve this one. It's given that P and Q are positive integers. So let us assume two cases, one in which Q is greater than P and the other where it's the other way around. In the first case, the value of quantity A is 2 by 5 and the value of quantity B is 1 by 4. So quantity A is greater. In the second case, quantity A is 5 by 2 and quantity B is 4 by 1. And now you see quantity B is greater. Since we got both the cases, A being greater and B being greater, D is the correct answer choice. Please pause the video and solve this. There are two classes A and B. It's given that A has 60 boys, and it's also given that in class A, the boys to girls ratio is 1 to 2. So there must be 120 girls in class A, and in class B, the ratio is 3 to 1. So we can assume that the number of boys and girls is 3K and 1K respectively. Now, when the two classes are combined, the ratio becomes 1 to 1. That means these two values are equal. 60 plus 3k equals 120 plus k. We can solve it for k. We get the value of k as 30. Therefore, these values here are 90 and 30 respectively. We can cross-check. 60 plus 90 is 150 and 120 plus 30 is again 150. You see the two values are equal. The ratio would be 1:1. So there are 150 students in each class, and therefore the total number of students in the two classes combined is 300. That's the correct answer. The concept of variation. Please look at this example. The value varies inversely with square of thickness. Therefore, if two values are to be compared, the ratio is going to be such. So value of coin A versus value of coin B, the ratio is going to be thickness of coin B square upon thickness of coin A square. It's given that thickness of coin A is 3 times. Therefore, the denominator here is going to be 9 versus a numerator of 1. Therefore, value of coin B is 9 times the value of coin A. The answer here is 9 times. This was a very mathematical explanation. More intuitively, you can just say that A is 3 times thicker, and since the value varies inversely with square of the thickness, A must be 3 square, that is 9 times cheaper, or in other words, B must be 9 times costlier. Questions based on variation generally involve the proportionality sign or the use of a constant. Let's take a basic example here. Look at this question. It says A varies directly with square of B, so A is proportional to B square, and then it says that A varies inversely with C. So we can write this as A is proportional to 1 by C. Combining these two, we can say that A is proportional to B square by C. And now, to remove this proportionality sign, we need to introduce a constant K here. Now, two cases are given. In the first case, A is 100, B is 20, while C is 5. We put these values here in this equation to get the value of K. We get K equals 5 by 4. We know this equation, A equals K times B square by C, and now we know the value of K. So for the second case, the value of A is known, B is known, the value of K is known, therefore the value of C can be determined. On putting the values of A, B, and K in the equation, we get this expression which can be solved to get the value of C. The answer is 4 by 3. Please pause the video and solve this question. The equation is already given to us. The value of Q decreases by 75%. That means the denominator here becomes 1/4. We know that the denominator therefore has become 1/4, and square of it means that in the denominator we have 1 by 16. Therefore, the value of P will become 16 times. So if it were 100 earlier, now it is 1600. Some students will choose 1600%, but that's not correct. See, the increase here is 1500 on a base of 100, which is 1500%. Please pause the video and solve this one. So his salary has a fixed component plus $T for all cars in excess of the first 20 cars. In May, his salary was 4,000, so 4,000 is equal to some fixed component plus T times. He sold 30 cars, so 30 minus 20, 10 comes here. And in June, he drew $5,500 for some fixed component plus T times. Now he sold 15 extra cars, so T times 25. We have two equations and two variables. They can be comfortably solved. We get T equals $100 and F equals $3,000. A shortcut here, see the number of cars he sold increased by 15 and his salary increased by 1,500. That means he is earning an extra $100 per car. That means T is quite intuitively $100, and therefore in any month he sold 30 cars. That means he was paid $100 for 10 cars. That means the variable component was $1,000 and therefore the fixed component was $4,000 minus $1,000. The fixed component must be $3,000. Either way, the correct answer is $3,000. Please pause the video and solve this one. So rent is equal to some fixed rent plus some additional cost per guest. Now see, 50 guests became 100 guests, so the number of guests increased by 50, while the rent increased from 2,000 to 3,200. So the rent increased by 1,200 for an increase of 50 guests. That means the per guest cost is $24. Now there are 200 guests, so 100 guests over this case here. So the cost will increase by $2,400. Therefore, the cost would be $3,200 plus $2,400, which would be $5,600. That means the two quantities here are equal. C is the correct answer choice. A more mathematical approach here would be to form two equations using the two cases given here. So this would be one case, this is the first equation, and from the second case, this is the second equation. Solve it, you will get C as 24 and you will get F as 800. So for 200 guests, the rent would be 800 plus 24 times 200, which would be 5,600. The two quantities are equal. Please pause the video and solve this one. Let's assume this point represents present. 8 hours ago, the population was 1,000. That means at minus 8, the population was 1,000. Then 2 hours ago, the population was 1 million. So at minus 2, the population became a million. It's given that the population grows by the same factor each hour. So if the population was 10 raised to power 3 here, at minus 7, it would be k times 10 raised to power 3. And therefore, over a span of 6 hours, the population would be 10 raised to power 3 times k raised to power 6, which is equal to 10 raised to power 6. We can solve this for k. It turns out to be square root 10. That means the population now would be 10 raised to power 7. And the question is, what will be the population 2 hours hence? Therefore, at 2, the population would be 10 raised to power 8, which is 100 million.